Hey guys, it's Courtney. I'm back here with another design team project for Scrapping for Less. Today I'm going to be using the Sketched Rose border stamp set by Brutus Monroe, and I'm starting off with a piece of Bristol Smooth cardstock here. This is cut down to 5 1/4 by 4, and I'm just putting a little bit of Tambourmano multi-glue and kind of smearing that around with my finger, letting that dry. Once that's dry, that's repositionable. It's easier for me to do it this way when it's a larger image rather than using a magnet in my stamp positioner. So I'm going to be stamping with Blackout ink by Ink on 3. You can use any waterproof ink for this. So I positioned my stamp on the top portion of my card panel first, and I'll go ahead and ink that up real well, stamp that down, and I did end up stamping this twice. This is obviously a huge image with a whole lot of detail to it, and I wanted to make sure that I had a really bold black outline. Once that was stamped out, I will go ahead and I'm going to move my card panel up. Now I have that Tambourmano multi-glue on the bottom, so it's going to stick to wherever I need it to stick. And I'm using the area, I guess, where the stamp kind of went beyond my card panel as a guide to make sure that it is as spaced out as I possibly can get it from the top and the bottom. Went ahead and stamped that twice again, and I'm going to be doing some very simple, messy watercoloring here. I'm taking some Zig Clean Color real brush markers here, and I have a pink and an orange, a yellow, and 2 different greens, and I'm just going to start scribbling. So I'm going to take the pink and just scribble a little bit of color in the center of the flower, kind of circle that with the orange, circle that again on the outside of each of the flowers with that yellow color, and then I'll take the lightest green and kind of scribble that wherever there is a leaf. I'm not filling it in, I'm just scribbling where the leaves are. I'm not worried about, getting a good coverage here at this point. I did take the darker green color just to add a little bit of, sometimes I'm just putting a little dot or a line in the leaves just to get a little variation of color. I'm not too worried about blending at this point. Once my color was scribbled, I'm going to take a Mr. Water bottle here, and I'm just going to spray the panel. And for the flowers, they weren't really blending too much, so I'm going to get real close to them and go ahead and spray that and just let the water spread, let the water do its thing. I did take a paper towel just to kind of dab up any of the puddles that I was getting. The Bristol Smooth can take quite a bit of water. It just takes a little bit longer to dry than traditional watercolor paper, I found, when you're using this much water. But you can use your heat tool. I did set this aside to dry. I prefer to air dry anytime I'm watercoloring. Once that was dry, we'll move on to the sentiment. And I'm taking a scrap piece of black cardstock. I'll treat this with my anti-static tool, and I'm using 2 of the sentiments from the stamp set, and I love the font on these sentiments. I'll go ahead and stamp these out with my Versamark ink. I did end up not being able to fit them both on the bottom, so I had to turn my panel or cardstock around, treat it again with my anti-static tool, and stamp that second sentiment down. I'll just want to make sure that I'm careful when I trim this down that I don't accidentally trim too much on one side and ruin the sentiment on the other. I sprinkled on some Hero Arts white embossing powder, and then I'll go ahead and heat set that. I did preheat my heat gun or let that heat up before bringing it to the paper. Usually for sentiment strips, you don't have to worry too much, but it does prevent any warping or as much as it possibly can. I went ahead and took out my tonic trimmer, and I will cut my little sentiments into small strips. I have a hard time cutting a straight line, so I find using a paper trimmer is best. But if you feel confident, you can certainly freehand this. Once those were done, I'm going to take another piece of black cardstock, and all of mine is pre-cut. Well, most of my cardstock is pre-cut, but I went ahead and stuck that panel on with my Tambourmano multi-glue onto that black cardstock. I did end up trimming this down twice. The first time I trimmed it down to be about an 1/8 of an inch on each side larger than my card panel. Then when I stuck my card panel down, I stuck it down real crooked and I waited too long and my glue had already started to dry, so I wasn't able to rip that up. So I brought back my paper trimmer once again and trimmed each of the sides that had a little bit larger of a border, and just being careful not to trim off too much. You'll see that I'm just taking a tiny little sliver off some of the sides to kind of give it a very, very small border, but all four sides are a little bit more even than they were before. I'll go ahead and take that same Tombow Mono Multi Glue to adhere my panel down to a top folding white A2 size note card. And then finally, I did take my Scotch foam tape to adhere my sentiment strips right there in the center. And finally, I took my Spectrum Noir sparkle pen just to add a little bit of sparkle to the flowers themselves. I didn't bother to fill in all of the leaves. Just keep in mind that anytime you're using a water-based medium such as the Zigs or Distress Inks or any other watercolor medium, that when you add this sparkle, it will start spreading your color even more. So I went in very, very quickly. I kind of outlined it and then just filled it in very quickly. But here is the finished card. Thank you guys so much for stopping by. As always, I'll leave the supplies listed below. Have a great day. Bye.